You're listening to CTOBOB with Bob Pellerin.
Hi, I'm Bob Pellerin, CTO Bob. Today on a special podcast / video, I wanted to discuss remote connection. And the reason I'm bringing this up obviously is the quarantines that we're having all over the world due to this virus. And I thought it would be a great subject to start up a new podcast. So first and foremost, the easiest for your enterprise, if you are using a firewall or you've got a router that allows you to do VPN, the virtual private network. And a router, I've got a couple with me. These are actually older models and just happen to have a box recycling basically. But these rarely ever break first of all. So generally people or companies will change these because they're getting older and they want to have more functionality, they want to have faster machines, or they want to increase the capacity. That's why they get replaced. Some of the major brands, we work with WatchGuard, we work with Fortinet as well. This is another older model as well. And what you do is basically go in, you define your users. Depending on the model you have, most of these have built-in VPN clients right out of the gate. And so in this case, like if you have a smaller model, it would be like a T15, it comes with 5 users. The T35 would have 25 users and so forth. And of course you go up from there and you can have hundreds, thousands, depending on your environment. Now what this will do is it will give you the ability to act as if you are physically on location. So it's like taking your laptop or your home desktop and bringing it to work and plugging it in directly into the network. That's what a VPN will do for you. On the home side, because I'm assuming at this point you are, or your employees are at home, it's an application. You go and get it. It works on Macs, on iOS, it works on Windows, obviously, and you'll download it. If it's a WatchGuard, they have it rated from their website. You just download it, install it, do next, and then you need the IP address of your work, and of course, whoever set up the router will know what that is, and the username and the password that was assigned to that user. So that's sort of the most basic way of doing it. At that point, you will have access to your servers. You'll be able to, of course with the right credentials, you'll be able to use your username and password to go and access things like public shares, whatever information that you have internally that your home machine has access to. Step further, if you then have specific applications that are running at a desktop at work. So if you've got an environment where you've got 25 individuals in an office and they're set up for specific things, specific tasks, connecting to ERPs, connecting to CRMs, I can go on and on, depending on the applications and the industry that you're in, of course. Then what you might want to do is you might want to take it a step further and use something called remote desktop, or RDP. What's nice is the RDP is built into the Windows environment. So if you have a Windows 10, at that point you can, from your home, connect through the VPN. It also works outside of the VPN, by the way. It's not as secure. That's why I'd recommend using a VPN. But if this is an emergency and you need to connect, then on the firewall, on these little boxes or your router, you need to then redirect a port to be able to go onto your machine. Because your machine at work will have a specific IP address. And your home machine or desktop, laptop, so forth, needs to connect to that IP address inside of your office. And again, you'll have to read up on these things, but it's important to understand that they exist and how it works. And this is why I'm going through this. Once you're connected, you will basically be getting the screen from your desktop at work into your, let's say, laptop at home. So if you move the mouse, it sends the mouse signal and the keyboard signal to your work PC, and that PC then returns the screen. So you're seeing what your PC at work is doing. So if you have Microsoft Office installed at the office and you don't have it at home, you would actually, within this remote desktop, see the complete office and be able to use it, because in effect you are using your PC at work remotely. That's a very straightforward way. Larger companies use remote desktop on a server. What that implies is that the server itself is licensed and set up to accept sessions. So instead of going to a PC, everyone would then be going to a single point of contact. They'll basically be going to the server. And the server, if you're curious, uses 3389 as a default port. And at that point, through VPN or without a VPN, you need the username and the password to get in. Obviously, the challenge is if you open this up to the internet, yes, you can connect. However, you're giving the chance that someone anywhere in the world will sit in front of their computer and try out a name and a password. And think also that they automate things now. It's not just a hacker somewhere or a child somewhere that sits there and finds out that there's Mary working at company X, Y, and Z that tries passwords one by one. This is an automated process in most cases. And what they will do is they will say, look up the firm, say, hey, there is a John Smith working there. They'll try John Smith, John Smith, J Smith, and so forth. And then they'll try the entire dictionary against these names. And eventually, in most cases, they will end up with a combination of a user and a password. And then once it's compromised, it starts to get a little strange from there, because you don't know what they're after. If they're after data, they'll try to steal. If they're after running things on your infrastructure, then they'll be running things internally which may or may not slow down or affect other systems. And you can see where this is going. And of course, they could also infect you and give you ransomware. I mean, it's endless what they can do. And sometimes it's funny because well, not really funny, but I mean, sometimes they will get into the system and not be very competent about it, and not really disrupt things, but give enough hints that they're in, and then it gets strange from there. I mean, I've seen things like Russian keyboards popping up on servers, and there's no one internally that uses Russian keyboards. I mean, someone connected. So some of these things can be stopped or hindered with a VPN. And these boxes as well, you can do things like geofencing. So you could say if you are in US and you say, hey, I don't want any traffic from Europe, I don't want traffic from Asia, I don't want traffic, you can block it. So at that point, you're starting to reduce your risk. Because the last thing you want is Mary, who's 3 streets away from your office, to suddenly be logging in from China or from New Zealand when they should not be from there. So that's one way to do it. Other tools that you could use as well will include things like TeamViewer, and these are back to going to your PC. So you'll have a TeamViewer, GoToAssist is another one. There's Splash. I'm trying to think. AnyDesk is a relatively new one. So all these things are back to the desktop itself, and you'll have to check with the manufacturers to see what the licensing requirements are. But in most cases, for personal use, some of these companies will offer it for free. However, once it becomes a commercial use, then there are licenses that need to be acquired. When you're running remote desktop off a server, for example, not only do you have your Windows server license that you purchase, but you also have something called a CAL, C-A-L, which is a client access license. So for every individual that connects to the server, they'll need one of those licenses. If you're using Office, if it's installed on the server, then you will need to buy a license for each user. Keep in mind, and we'll have this discussion in a moment, that if it's in a cloud-based offering like Office 365, it changes the dynamic a little bit. The other thing is the remote desktop on a server requires licensing as well. So that means that we're up to 3 licenses in this case. We've got the CAL, we've got the Office, and we've got the remote desktop for a single user, and that's what would need to be in place. Of course, you can, in this case of an emergency, you can scale up, and at that point you'd go back and purchase the appropriate licenses. Do keep in mind as well that it's not because you have a server and it works well with 1 or 2 or 3 people that you can suddenly say, hey, I'm going to throw in 50 more and life is great. The servers have only so many cores, so many CPUs in them, and they may not scale very well. It may start to degrade if you pass a certain threshold. Now, so the memory, the number of CPUs, number of cores, and of course the disk space, each user, even if they're not working locally necessarily in that server, will consume a little bit of space, and they've got a profile, they've got other things on there that just get created automatically. And so you just have to keep that in mind and monitor things. The bottom line is it all can be done and you can scale things. And sometimes people have scaled very well and nothing really gets affected. And sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes they will start scaling and they'll notice that their ERP system will start to spit out some errors or will just really lag. And if you've got if you've got people in the back with shipping and you've got handheld scanners and they've got 100,000 things to scan and all of a sudden it takes 5 minutes per scan, that's going to bring you to a grinding halt. And that's something you don't want to affect your production, obviously. So past that, look, I mean, between all those tools to connect remotely and to stay secure, there's also the whole communication aspect as well, where you can have virtual meetings. You could use Zoom.us, for example, which is very popular right now, and GoToMeeting is another one. The other thing I was mentioning earlier is the whole cloud aspect. Now, if you're not using things in the cloud, maybe now would be a good time to start thinking about it. For example, the Office 365 is wonderful right now because if you have individuals that are at the office, had everything installed, your Outlook and so forth, all of a sudden they're on the road, they're at home really, off a desktop, off a home PC, and they need to have access to Outlook, to their emails. Well, if you've got Office 365, you can let them go into the portal using a browser, and they could be using their phone, their tablet, their whatever device they've got. And at that point, it's all built in as part of your licensing. You don't have stuff to install. It's quite simple. You go to portal.office.com, and you put in your username, your password, and ta-da, you're working. So that's, I mean, it's hard to beat in these times of crisis. It's a wonderful tool and service to use. I'm not saying this as an ex-Microsoft employee. I'm just, in general, it's hands down one of the best systems I've seen. I've recommended it and I use it. So the other thing is for the rest of your systems, the CRMs, the ERPs and so forth, there are versions of practically every major system out there, whether it's Salesforce for CRM, the list just goes on, but these are all cloud-based. And cloud-based just means that these things are running off the servers of those companies. So if you're going to get a virtual server instead of a physical server, you could get it in Azure, for example. And at that point, it's basically hosted at Microsoft. And Microsoft will deal with the hardware, and so forth. And you can scale it up or down. You actually get charged on usage. And this is all on the cloud. You go on a website, you select what you need, you pay for it, and it turns on. If you need something with SQL, which is a database, you turn it on. It's a matter of minutes. I mean, you can scale up hours, obviously, depending on the complexity of what you need, what you have installed or need to install. But in most cases, that is the fast and dirty way of doing it. There are some costs associated with these things. However, it takes away the hardware, it takes away a lot of the problems you might have right now. Like if you're listening to me right now and things have been quarantined now for, we've all been restricted from going to the office, for example, and I have a lot of clients that have shut down or partially shut down, and it's very difficult to call up a Dell or HP and get your server and say, I need it now because by next Monday we want everybody out of here. We don't want to have any personnel on site. It's a little late to get the hardware. We're seeing, and I'm having individuals call me telling me that the laptops are not necessarily available, the ones that they want. And of course with China going down as well production-wise, we will see shortages going down or coming up in the short term. So we don't know how that will affect us all longer term. I guess we'll find out. There's a bunch of interesting product announcements, for example, from Apple. Will they be available? Where do you go? I mean, you can't go and get them. I know Amazon's having some issues or some challenges getting things quickly to us because there's such demand, and things like more basic consumable type of products now are taking precedence for them. And I understand if people are not getting food or people are not getting basic things like toilet paper, well, that's where the priority is going to go. So I hope some of this has been useful, and stay safe. I hope everyone there is well. And if you've enjoyed this and you're watching this on Facebook or YouTube or one of those, please consider subscribing, giving us a thumbs up, and send comments. We are at www.ctobob.com. I'm Bob Pellerin, CTO Bob. I'll see you next time.